So a couple of weeks ago, I watched The Force Awakens, and it's a pretty good film, but it's way too overrated. That's what I'm talking about today. The movie is good. I'm gonna do the review like a normal review, and I'm gonna go through the positives first. First of all, the acting. Whoa, the acting was really good. This was an Inglorious Bastards. This was an Inglorious Bastards of Star Wars. It was so well acted. It had really great performance. Like, Rey and Finn were the best. Sincerely, it's weird because it's a new cast. Um, Kylo Ren was good, but then he was weak. I felt, when I saw Kylo Ren, he was good, but when he took off his mask, it's not a spoiler because it doesn't happen in the trailer, but it happens. It's not a spoiler. But when he takes off his mask, he looks weak. He's not what I thought he was. And sure, it's actually a really good visually thing to tell us that, he wants to be like Darth Vader, but he can't. So, because he's weak. But in a villain, you need to have not a weak villain. Even the Goosebumps villain was 10 times more powerful. Slappy was freaking powerful, okay? And that's from the Goosebumps movie, which is good. It's good. It's not bad. Sorry, but yeah, getting off the track. Now, the acting by the old actors, it was great, or it was good. It wasn't like before. Han Solo and Chewie were like the big nostalgic thing, and I didn't care for Han Solo in this movie. I actually cared for him in Return of the Jedi for some reason, but in this one I didn't care. I just I didn't care. I couldn't care less if he wouldn't be in the movie and if he was in the movie. So, yes. Another thing I didn't, well, again, I said about the villains, but again, Snoke was nothing to me. I actually liked that he wasn't this gigantic, like, kind of god. He was a person, or maybe he was like a weird alien race or something. I liked that, but you see him as a big ass giant in a hologram. So, you don't know, he might be an ant. So, that didn't piss me off, but yeah, I don't know about it. And I didn't like the idea of like this big ass villain when you had Kylo Ren as it was supposed to be Darth Vader, but no, it's Snoke. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Also, another thing that I really liked were the visual effects. Good job, J.J. Abrams and the visual effects department. This is really good CGI. Like, seriously, really good CGI. Most of it is practical, which I really respect. And when it's CGI, it's so real, but it's fake. I don't know how that happened, but I was watching this kind of monster, which I thought he could have been an actor, but no, it didn't happen. Or not monster, like this alien that helps Rey on kind of restaurants or something. That's what I'm gonna give you. But she looks amazing. She really looked like a great CGI character, but it had really good texture, but I said that is CGI. I don't know how. I really don't know how I said that's CGI. Maybe because my eyes are trained to see that? I don't know. But yeah, there's, the story is good. It's not mind blowing like something a 3-year-old would do. It's great. The characters, great. But most of the characters are great because of the original series, and the new characters are good because of good writing. That's what I think. The editing was pretty good, everything was really good. Cinematography, oh my god, cinematography. Really, really nailed it. I love the cinematography here. It was really well used. It was really creative, in my opinion, and it was, really fun and exciting. If we're talking about fun and exciting stuff, also I'm gonna give the cinematography a gold, because there's bronze, silver, and gold for me. So cinematography is golden, okay? But if we're talking about fun and exciting, the movie is really fun and exciting. The pace was really well handled. It wasn't way too fast where you couldn't even know what's happening, and it wasn't way too slow for an action movie. You see, there are slow-paced films that are really good, and then because most of it is dialogue or is romance or something, and then if there's slow pace on an action movie, you can't do that, because you're here to watch an action. You're here to watch action or sci-fi or something. You're not here to, just be there and having the same conversation and you're like getting bored. No, this movie treats it good. It treats him, it does everything good. But yes, maybe some characters aren't the best or not, maybe some are really weird. And another thing I want to mention, this is so, I think it's the uncheesiest of them all. The original series is so cheesy, but so good, but so cheesy. This one is not cheesy. Weird, right? So, another thing I want to mention too is that this isn't a J.J. Abrams film. This is another thing. If you watch Super 8 or even the Star Trek movies, that is a J.J. Abrams movie. This is not a J.J. Abrams movie. This is a Star Wars fan movie. That's what I think. Because the movie sets a weird and different tone for J.J. Abrams. He's a really good director, one of my favorites, actually. And, like with titles with Super 8 and stuff. But those movies represent him as, he's really good at sci-fi. So, those movies like Super 8 and Star Trek represent them. This movie totally flips him over. It's a really well-directed film, but it doesn't feel like it, it was J.J. Abrams. And I thought that was great. It felt like Tarantino. Well, not. It didn't feel like Tarantino, but it was like Tarantino, because Tarantino is a really complex director. He does weird stuff, he might do a really weird kind of heist movie, and then he does a really weird revenge movie. So, he's on the same tone, but he changes stuff, This is what happened with J.J. Abrams, and I really like that. It didn't. I would have liked the movie if it had a tone like Super 8, but I really like that it changed. J.J. Abrams, I want him to do movies like Super 8 and Star Trek, and I want him to do movies like this. But yeah, going to the negatives, which I really found not that much. Starkiller Base, basically Star, it's just that's Star 3. And I didn't have a problem with the second Death Star for some reason. Sure, it's open, but I always thought they never ended the construction for the second Death Star, and maybe because it was bigger and stuff. And now you have a planet of a Death Star, and I really don't mind it. It's just a third chance. But if we're gonna see another Death Star, I'm just gonna flip over. That's something you can't do. Another thing, this is just A New Hope. I hope the next movie isn't like Empire Strikes Back and the third one like Return of the Jedi, because if it is, it's gonna be too bad. So yeah, I hope, because it's just gonna be copying off. And yeah, another thing is that the hype, the fans. I consider myself a Star Wars fan, sort of, but I'm not that big of a fan. There's people that literally would freak out if you would say Star Wars is a bad movie. And I respect other people's opinions, and there's fans that respect other people's. You get me. But people were so hyped that they ruined the film. The fans ruined it because you couldn't stop talking about Star Wars. Then you would become annoyed of Star Wars, and then when you go to the movie, you're like having fun, but then you're like annoyed of Star Wars because of the fans. That's my theory or something. So yeah, those are really my negatives. But something that really also pissed me off was Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. I don't know if I said this in my review already or not. This is really long. But anyway, Rotten Tomatoes gave it first a 100%. That is amazing. That's something a masterpiece would have, right? And IMDb gave it a 9.3 out of 10, I think. I'm not sure. The first time. And then that is for a masterpiece. Alright? And, it was the highest Star Wars movie ever made. And even higher than Empire. So, then they changed it to, Rotten Tomatoes changed it to 95, which I kind of agreed, but then I was like, no, it should deserve more of a 92. And then IMDb, I think they stayed with 8.4 out of 10 or something, 8.8 or something like that. And then Rotten Tomatoes changed it to 93%. You see how they're changing the things? They're trying so, I'm not saying they're trying so hard, but the hype, I think that's what happened. The hype, you were so excited, so you're excited in the film. So then you'll say it's an amazing film because you were excited all the time, because you were so hyped. That's how I think it works. I like the movie. I left with a smile in my face, but there were things I didn't like it. And when they told us that J.J. Abrams was gonna direct the film, I was like, it's gonna be a good film, because J.J. Abrams hasn't directed a bad film or a bad TV show, because he's really good at those. Well, I think, Lost was amazing. So don't argue with me. But yeah, so that's, I think, it for the movie. Honestly, I would give it an 8 out of 10, because an 8 out of 10 is a decent film. Or, well, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10 because that's more of a decent film. Because the movie is really decent. But, you know, you want to give it an 8 out of 10. So I'm going to give it an 8.1 out of 10. Because 8 isn't really that hard in my list. 9 is hard and 10 is impossible, almost. Masterpiece. So, yeah. Thank you so much for watching, and bye.